This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Making intuition intentional in your personal or professional life. Valeria Tellez interviews Maryann Kelly, the founder of Intuitive Services Insight, medium, mentor, speaker, author, holistic energy practitioner. Following a successful 33-year corporate career working globally, Maryann made a shift to follow her intuition. She went from corporate executive roles immersed in meetings and metrics to being a medium, mentor, speaker, author, and holistic energy practitioner, understanding how the universal principles of metaphysics, energy, and intuition allow communications with those passed over. These same principles of intuition also explained her insights regarding others' holistic health. Maryann is passionate about trying to alleviate client suffering. Sometimes the root cause of suffering is elusive. Being a medium, I have been able to accelerate the identification of the root cause, says Maryann. Intuitive Services Insight is a center of energy excellence, COEE, integrating a non-invasive set of modalities such as past life regression, cord/entity removals, residential property and vehicle clearings, emotional freedom tapping, EFT, and scalar wave, which can help both identify root cause and enable, for example, elusive layers of complex post-traumatic stress syndrome, complex PTSD, and tension myositis, myoneural syndrome, TMS, to be addressed while empowering the client for daily living along the way. Maryann's decades in corporate combined with her intuition expertise offer professionals a unique mentoring experience to remove obstacles and change undesired patterns for personal and career benefit. Maryann continues to work globally as her clients, who are both people and pets, are from USA, Canada, Spain, Portugal, United Kingdom, Ukraine, Sweden, Jordan, China, Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, and Africa. She earned certifications in both Advanced and Mastery Medical Intuition, Tina Zion programs, Light Grid and Advanced Light Grid, Level 1 and 2 Reiki, and Animal Communication, Joan Ranquet program, in addition to her university degrees in finance and information systems. She also further complemented her depth by completing the Donna Eden online energy medicine curricula and energy healing for animals. To learn more about Maryann Kelly and her work, please visit intuitiveservicesinsight.com.
In your own words, who is Maryann Kelly?
Well, Maryann Kelly is a soul that is constantly evolving.
That's simple.
Well, I think as my life goes on, I become more and more of a student of life, and I realize that things are boiling more and more down to a sense of simplicity, which makes life decisions, I think, both more profound and more simple to make as well.
But the soul, so I hear that word a lot. Also the spirit, also the true self. I'm wondering if they're all connected.
Well, I believe they are. So I look at spirit as an energy that's in the universe that has different vibrations, and a collection of those energies were formed to make my soul and the souls of others. So I consider my soul to be among the many spirits that are out there, and the spirits speak a language of energy. And that language of energy I happen to call intuition, as far as trying to convert energy into something that humans can understand and act on.
Another word, consciousness. Would that be the same? Spirits and consciousness, they are one and the same.
Yes, I think they're very similar. I think for me, the definition of consciousness becomes more about how do we become more aware of what our purpose is, not only for ourselves, but in the grand scheme of the working with others or living with others, and on the most grand scale, and the universe at large.
What is your definition of power?
Well, I think that power, when it's sought after to control others, is not power in its best form. I think that power in the form in which it can serve to motivate and help people become their best selves and to become more compassionate. I think that power in the positive context is what my more recent definition was. So I think when I hear the word power, I have two distinct frames of reference that come to my consciousness. There's the power that's from the ego, and then there's the power that is generated more from compassion and kindness, that tends to be more universal and wanting a greater good.
How do you define success these days? What is to be successful to you?
Well, my definition of success has definitely evolved and changed in my life, and I would say that now I'm the most successful that I've ever been in terms of fulfillment and contentment and being part of other people's journey as well.
What do you think is the purpose of the human experiment?
I think the purpose of the human experiment and life is to learn and to grow and to see how we can be our best self in terms of fulfilling what our potential is. And I think that when we can become compassionate to others and we can become more of a person that surrenders to that potential, then we can experience life in its fullest.
Yeah, I agree. And I often wonder why it is so challenging to trust and to surrender.
Well, fear. I think fear is a part of the human experience that is very, very difficult to overcome because it triggers so many emotions within us. And so I believe that fear is the number one reason that holds people back from trusting and surrender. And fear takes many, many shapes, whether it's fear of lack of money, whether it's fear of judgment of others, whether it's fear of perceived position, etc.
Is there a way to know when we are driven by love and not fear? What are some of the ways to know?
Well, I think for me, it's when it has that first pop, meaning when I describe to people how to use intuition just comes. And when it comes, and intuition is based upon the purity of love. It doesn't have a negative agenda. So when that first pop comes, that is aligned with love versus taking an action that's driven by fear, which often involves the human brain going through permutations and combinations of pros and cons and who's going to come out best or who's going to come out on top or all the ramifications, then it's not necessarily driven by love. Or we can use another example when we see love manifest in beautiful ways when, strangers on the scene of an accident or the scene of a catastrophe just jump in to help. There's love.
What is the difference between intuition and rational thinking and also imagination?
So intuition, again, is what I call the language of energy, and intuition is that first pop. Now, where thinking gets involved, and that's more of the human brain going through a decision-making process, weighing pros and cons. Now, as a medium and an energy worker, when that intuition comes in, do I use some of my human faculties to actually verbalize what I'm getting? Yes, I do. But that's different than me changing the message of what I'm getting. So people will say to me, well, are you thinking about it? And I'll say, no, I'm not thinking about it. I got the information, and the information may come to me in signs, symbols, words, pictures, little movies might play for me. And I'm trying to extract out that meaning and condense it so that I can articulate a sentence that's valuable to the client. But in that sense, I'm using my brain not to change the message, not to think about it in terms of changing it, but more so how to deliver it such that it provides the intended value.
So imagination, Maryann, is that connected to intuition somehow?
Well, I guess in my self-discovery process of this phase of my life, the fear that I had was these messages and this intuition, it feels like imagination. And I really held back for quite a while in talking about what I do now because I didn't want to hurt anyone, and I really wasn't sure how to distinguish. And in the end, though, the intuitive experience really can feel like imagination because it comes in pure, just like when you're a little kid and you might have some remembrances of daydreaming or something, and something comes in from your imagination when you're a child playing with toys or whatever it is. And it's that lightness. When you use your imagination, it's a very light experience. When intuition comes in, even if what comes in is a very serious message, it still has a lightness about it because it's pure. It's correct.
What do you love most about being a woman?
Well, I think that I like the fact that there seems to be much more of an acceptance about the gentleness associated with being a female. But there's a but I have. And the but that I have is at the same time, through much of my life, especially my life in the corporate world, I was considered to have a much more male personality. So I think that it's not so much to me the distinction between male versus female as it is about what are the qualities that an individual has that enables them to best become the person fulfilling their potential to also help others. So I tend to not want to get into the strengths of male or female because, quite frankly, in my life, I've been told I have so much male in me as far as my corporate work, which I would agree, according to how things are typically defined in society. And at the same time, to answer your original question, as far as the female characteristics, I do like that sensitivity that is more associated with females in our society, and that gentleness and that compassion.
What lessons have you learned from 2020? And do you have a vision for a new, better reality?
Well, I think that my lessons learned in 2020 is becoming increasingly more in focus about how important the unseen is. And the unseen in terms of, say, the suffering would be COVID. We can't see a virus, but we've certainly learned how to become more aware of it through the catastrophic suffering that is happening. At the same time, one of the things that I was stressing earlier in my current career to people is when they would say, I don't really necessarily believe in energy and all this other stuff. And I would say, well, I think we just want to be careful about making sure that we're understanding how powerful, in a good way, the unseen can be as far as energy, love, oxygen, all those things that I just said that have certain nouns and words that we put to them as humans, all are unseen, but they're certainly very important. So in 2020, what I believe is important is that we as a human race are really understanding what's truly important to each of us as far as relationships with one another, as far as the relationship to the planet, as far as the relationship to our environment, etc. I think that's really critical. As far as going forward, I think that again, when our society was looking at, well, who are essential workers? And I think that that was an amazing question and type of differentiation that was put on it. And I think that the people that were better acknowledged for their true contribution to us as a society as a whole got better identified. And I think in that process, it shouldn't have to take COVID, of course, to have that. But I think in that process, I'm hoping that the awareness of how important actually everyone's role is, whether you're going out to do a job or you're doing it from home, or whether you're taking care of children, or whatever your function in life is, it's important.
What is the meaning of freedom to you? What is to be free?
To be free means that I feel totally fulfilled and totally content, and I have the strength to go after what I need to do in order to attain that. That's freedom, as I don't really have a want for anything. I'm so satisfied and fulfilled in the current state.
What is love to you?
Love is the most pure type of energy that is the most powerful among everything that there is.
And that also leads me to a question that I often ask is unconditional self-love. Do you believe that unconditional self-love is a realistic practice?
Well, I think it's something that we should all strive for. And I think it's important to distinguish that unconditional self-love is not selfish. Right. In fact, it's the opposite, because I discussed this with several of my clients. And I think that while it may be difficult for us to say we've attained it, I do think that it's part of the journey that should always be sought, because I think that when we can say that we've unconditionally loved ourselves, it actually makes us better in balance. And then when we're better in balance as individuals, then by default, we're also helping others.
How did you become a writer? And what was the inspiration of writing The Thunder of Intuition, a piece published in the book Your Shift Matters, Surviving to Thriving by, I think her name is Dana Zarcone?
Yes, I've always liked to write, even as a child, and I enjoyed using language because I find that language can be so powerful, and there's so many words that you can use and phrases to really get across not only a message intellectually, but to evoke a visceral understanding that people are so affected by reading the written word. And so I appreciated the value of writing as a child. And then as I embarked on this journey and went through a transformation, certainly, I wanted to share that story in hopes that as others might read it, if they have fear about taking a great leap as I did, that they will be able to overcome it to help themselves and to help others.
Talk to me for a moment about that story, Maryann.
When I look back, I had these nudges, as I would call them, or these vibrations, this tapping on me with information coming in. And when I look back, I realized when I was taking care of my grandmother as a child, my grandmother lived with us and then she became ill, and the family took care of her. And during my time in taking care of her, she was telling me stories about how to interpret information. And she may not be using these particular words, but this was her point. And I remember being small and not really understanding what she would say. And she would say, just, you'll remember these stories later, they'll make sense. And so fast forward when all these messages kept coming in a much more fast and furious way, as believe it or not, as when I started ballroom dancing as the catalyst. And all these messages just were flooding in. And then I did have that flashback. Oh, this is what my grandmother was talking about. And then I realized when I looked back through my corporate career and had some successes and figured things out that were rather obscure, I realized this was using my intuition as well. I'm sure it was in combination with the fact that I had some university training in the topics and I worked hard. But the differentiator, I really believe, was being able to tap in and use intuition, even though I didn't really recognize it for what it was at the time. So when I was deciding what to do in my next step after my time in corporate, and I took a ballroom dance lesson as one of the things on my bucket list. And then all these messages just started coming in, because for the first time since I had been a tiny child, I was really doing one thing at a time, which I had to concentrate on in terms of learning this dance lesson because it was new to me. And then I realized, oh my goodness, all the puzzle pieces just started to come together. The topics that my grandmother was talking to me about as a child, all these different situations in my corporate world started to come together. And truly, I was getting a picture formed with all these puzzle pieces. And then information was coming in regarding others that could be helpful. And when I shared it with some others, friends or people close to me, and they were like, yes, that's right. And it was helpful to them. I realized, I guess I really need to be doing something more with this information in this next chapter of my life. And that's what drove me to make the change. And I had also met with somebody that's a respected medium. And when I met with him a few times, and he said, you can do this, right? And he put 3 pictures down in front of me, and I didn't know anything about the people in the pictures. There's nothing special about these particular snapshots at all. And all this information came flooding through, and I almost wondered who's speaking. Right. And then I'm like hearing myself speaking, but this information is coming in from someplace else. It's not coming in by my brain's not generating it. And he said, well, you're right. And I know you're right because I happen to know these 3 people. And then one thing after another just kept happening, which kept validating this is the path. Right. And then I met Tina Zion, and the same thing kept happening with her on the medical intuition, or I refer to it in my work as holistic health readings. Yeah. And the validation just kept happening faster and faster and faster, which made it very clear that this was the path I really needed to go on, which I'm delighted about.
So mediumship, is that an ability that everyone has, Maryann, or only some of us?
I believe that intuition, mediumship is an ability that we all have. I believe that we're born with it. I think that as children in some society circles, it's not something that's revered or encouraged, then it kind of gets dampened down, as happened with me. I mean, my grandmother was trying to fill me in, and, then she passed away. I continued with traditional school, and it wasn't really something that was fostered. But then it surfaced in a very resounding way, as I had previously mentioned. So I absolutely believe that this is something that is available to everyone. You have to make an effort to be quiet enough to welcome it and to help it develop in you.
So for clarity, what is the difference between being a psychic and being a medium?
So being a medium, as I define it, is getting messages that have to do with the person's past. It can have to do with their present. It can have to do with their past lives. So it can be their past and the current life. It can be their past lives. It can be some inklings potentially about the future. And I say potentially because free will that we all have can change anything about the future at any time. Being a psychic, I think, is more about the person and the present. And I'll just state this for the record that I respect that there's a variety of perspectives on these definitions, and I respect everyone's perspective on it. I'm defining it as it pertains to the work that I do. I'm certainly respectful of other people's definitions and how they may use it in the work that they do.
In your website, you have this statement that says, making intuition intentional in your personal and professional life. So how do we make intuition intentional?
So I put that statement together because when I was earlier in my journey and I realized I was getting these messages, if I had done nothing with it, I really wasn't then applying it. And I'm a very practical person. Yeah. I'm a very down-to-earth person. I like results, and I like to see how they unfold. Yeah. So when I put that statement together, to me, it's about the intentional part is empowering yourself or empowering others with purpose, something meaningful that's going to be aligned with those positive intentions. So what are we going to get out of it? How do we know that we've achieved anything? And I'm not saying achieved according to money or status, but do we improve our lives? Do we improve our journey? Do we improve other people's lives?
Yeah, those are great questions. And this is different from the law of attraction.
I believe it can be part of it, but I believe that on a more personal level, individual level, we have the ability to use the intuition that we all are born with, again, to make it intentional. Yeah. And that's an active role. Now, with the law of attraction, you're making an active role to attract, right. But I believe you have an even more active, empowered role in making your own intuition intentional, which by default will help the law of attraction.
On your website, you said mediumship work beyond an initial reading is available for those desiring soul level healing. That's interesting about the soul, because some of us have this understanding, this idea that the soul is perfect, doesn't need any healing. Is that part of us that knows more than the ego mind does. So what is soul level healing? What would that look like?
So when I do an initial reading with someone, I may find injuries or negative energies associated with their past, associated with the current life, or their truly past lives, or I will come across other energies that are negative or dark that we typically don't want to have around us or carrying around with us. So the soul level healing is when we do either past life regression and we regress back to that past life to go to that root cause, that point of origin, to do the healing from that point of injury and then bring that root cause healing forward. That's one way that I provide a service. The other ways are removing energies that are manifesting in a harmful way to people. And sometimes they arise and it's difficult for more traditional means to find them or to become aware of them. And so then that's when sometimes clients come to me because they're having a recurrent problem that is not detected or found by more traditional means.
That makes sense. Would that be connected to the readings you offer? You offer many of them: spiritual reading, the dark entity removal, and past life regression. Is that connected to the soul level healing?
Yes, it is. So the soul level healing type of work is associated with removing cords, those negativity, those dark entities, past life regressions, and then two modalities that I use: emotional freedom tapping, that helps to do a reset, if you will, at the subconscious level, and then also scalar wave, which is another modality that's part of soul level healing as well.
And talk to me for a moment, Maryann, about the holistic health healing.
So the reason that I chose holistic health on my website instead of medical intuition is because two reasons. One, I want to be very, very clear that I do not pretend to be a medical physician who are typically associated with medical diagnoses. So I just wanted to not use a certain word that then there can be no confusion about that, right. Number one. And also out of respect for those individuals that are highly credentialed in the medical field as well. So it's both a respect matter and a differentiation point that I'm making. And the other reason I chose to use holistic health instead of medical intuition is that holistic is by default inherently including more. So the information that I'm getting may not be associated with what is traditionally thought of from a medical perspective. And that's other information that I'm going to include. For example, I could do a reading on somebody, and it has happened where I have found a dark entity that has really been causing quite a bit of upset and unwanted, pretty dramatic physical manifestations. Now, the manifestation is having, say, a medical impact, but the root cause wouldn't be associated with what is traditionally called medical. So I just found that it was easier for my clients to relate to. It's holistic. I bring in whatever information comes in through my intuition into the reading to provide as much value and as much help as I can going forward. So then that way we don't get into, conversations about, well, is that entity or is that thing attached to a certain organ? Well, possibly, possibly not. It may be in your field. And so it just makes the delivery of the service more valuable, including everything that I can include to provide assistance to that client.
So my question is it possible to use mediumship to cause harm to others?
No. I mean, my answer was so fast on that, but it's just
really fast.
So I didn't mean to cut you off there. It's just that it's just jumped right out of me that no,
Right.
no.
So we're almost at the end. I do have a few more questions for you, the ending questions. Would you like to add anything?
Well, I think because my journey involved so much of my work, somewhat in the clinical corporate settings, but also in more traditional financial services and IT settings, that I'm a little bit of an unusual person with that kind of a background. And I didn't expect that I was going to be doing this type of work in this part of my life. But I guess my ending statement would be that for those people that are drawn to this, that I want to offer them encouragement, because I'm the happiest I've ever been, the most fulfilled I've ever been. And there is a peace in surrender, which I've learned, and that if you can trust, you will have doors open that can offer you much greater fulfillment than you could probably have imagined. And that's what happened to me. And so I would encourage others to consider it. And for the skeptics, I was a skeptic myself, so I get it. And so I would say the work that we do with energy, it can't hurt you. It's not invasive. And you don't really have anything to lose by being open-minded just enough to give it a chance and try it, because it may bring you closure, it may bring you peace, it may bring you some other benefits that you hadn't thought of.
Yeah. Thank you, Maryann. Thank you for your beautiful purpose in this reality.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
What is another word for healing?
Peace.
If you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any change in your life or do anything in a different way?
I think that I would be more compassionate.
And my last question, what are 3 things about life you know for sure as of now?
To honor the unseen, meaning that just because the human senses may not be able to perceive something certainly does not mean that it is not real. So to honor the unseen, in some ways, we certainly have all learned that we have to honor COVID. That's a more unhappy example, but let's talk about the happy examples. We honor love, oxygen, and other things that are not seen. Number 2 is to not underestimate the amount of positive impact any one person of any age can make on another person or society or a group as a whole. And number 3, they saying about there's nothing greater than love is more true than I had ever realized before.
I love your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your work. Thank you for everything, Maryann. Your powerful message. Yes.
Thank you for doing this. You're certainly contributing to addressing a great need that is out there in the universe. So thank you.
Thank you. Where can we find more information about you, your work, products, services, and future projects?
Okay, so that would be my website, Intuitive Services Insight, all one word, intuitiveservicesinsight.com.
Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you.
Bye for now.